Welcome to the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. We sit down with passionate leaders in higher education for their thoughts and insights in today's world. We are excited to have as our guest Roger Hughes, president of Doane University in Crete, Nebraska.
I'd love to hear about your journey just because I know that your journey is unique compared to a number of other presidents who oftentimes take that academic route. Mm-hmm. So can you walk us through your journey, and then if you could tie in some of the mentors that really helped shape your path?
Sure. Well, you're right, Brad. I didn't come up the normal pathway to becoming a college president. I had always been involved in sports, always been involved in high academics. And so really, I originally wanted to start out to be a high school basketball coach. Basketball was my sport. Really small town in Nebraska, was pretty good for that conference. And then I came to college and realized that a 6'2" guy who can't dribble the ball very well is probably not going to last very long in college. All my friends were playing football. And at that time, I thought, you know what, if I could coach football and coach basketball, I could get a job at a bigger high school in Nebraska when I wanted to coach and therefore hopefully make more money. And so I pursued that. I finished my undergrad. I was lucky enough to get accepted in the master's program at the University of Nebraska in exercise phys, and I drove back and forth and coached at that time. Really, one of the pivotal things that happened was I went to see Coach Osborne, who at that time was the head coach of the University of Nebraska, and Coach Osborne had his EED. And so I went to him and just said, listen, I've been accepted to the PhD program. I love the research. I love the writing. I love teaching, but I also like coaching. What should I do? And he said, well, what do you think you like best? And I said, well, I really like coaching. He goes, well, then I would coach. And I'm going, you have to understand, Coach Osborne in Nebraska is a godlike figure. So I thought I was really being stupid in front of God there. Well, of course, you should do what you like. So that kind of started me off. I finished my PhD with his help. Tremendous. I mean, when we had meetings and I had to go study, Roger, go get your PhD done. So he was very supportive in that role. And so my journey in the coaching world, I was at Whitewater, Wisconsin, had great success. And then I went to Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma. From there, I went to the offensive coordinator at Dartmouth. I was the head coach at Princeton University. And I got fired at Princeton in 2009, and the president's job here at Doane, my alma mater, was open. So I interviewed for the job and did not get the job. And the reason that I was told I didn't get it was I wasn't academic enough. You know, well, I have a PhD. I think that's pretty academic, but I hadn't been in the academic world. I'd been coaching football, right? And so when I didn't get the job here, and thank goodness I didn't, because my next job was at Stetson University, and they were starting a football program after 56 years of not having a team. And what I learned during that time as I was integrating the new program into Stetson's University, I had to learn how a university worked. And I had to learn admissions, financial aid, obviously the student support, alumni relations, all that stuff. And so by not getting hired, and sometimes the biggest blessings you have are when the blessings say no. And thank goodness I didn't get hired because I was a much better candidate this time. And so about 10 years, I was at Stetson for 10 years, and one of the trustees on the search committee called me one day and said, listen, our president's leaving. Would you be interested in the job? And I said, well, I would be, but especially now with athletics, you have NIL and a transfer portal and all the other things going on. And I was at a school at Stetson. While we were building the program at the FCS level, we were always going to be a place where the big guys would come and take our athletes. And so I thought, you know what, this might be a good time to think about a career change. And so long story short, I ended up getting hired for the job. And the interesting thing was, you know, after about 3 days into it, I meet with my predecessor, and he was very gracious. Jack Carter was extremely gracious with his time. And I said, you know, Jack, sitting here after being here 3 days, you know, the enormity of the job sometimes overwhelming. I mean, I'm used to handling an organization of about 150 to 200 people. I'm not used to 400, 500 people on multiple campuses. And he smiled and he started to laugh. He goes, Roger, he goes, you'll grow into it. He said, every president doesn't know what to expect until they sit in the chair. You'll grow into it like every president. He said, frankly, you're way ahead of where I was when I got the job here because you've run organizations. You've had that experience. He said, I thought my academic background would be one that would set me up to have success. And I realized about 3 months into the job that I had no idea what I was doing. He said, so you're so far ahead of me from an organizational standpoint, a motivation standpoint. He says, you're going to be fine. And so it's been interesting because the novelty of where I came from, being a head football coach, jumping right into the presidency, I had conversations with Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel was the head coach at Ohio State. He, at that time, was the head coach he was the president of Youngstown State. In between, though, he'd been a dean at Akron University as well. So he'd been had a little bit of flavor of the academic side of stuff. And so I actually called him for advice. And he said, the biggest thing, he said, Roger, organizationally, you're going to be fine. You've run the organization, the leadership, that's fine. But here's going to be your biggest adjustment. He said, in football, you've got offense, defense, and special teams all working together to achieve the goal, to beat the opponent. And each week, any part of that system will take a back seat so the other part can work well so they can win. He said in higher education, it's not that way. You've got the College of Business, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the College of Education, and they don't care about each other. They're all competing for the same resources. And so that the biggest challenge you're going to have is to get all facets of the university moving in the same direction all the time. And he was right, although I've been very blessed. The faculty here at Doane have been extremely patient with my learning curve. And so we didn't really have any situations where, obviously faculty want to know who their boss is, but I really didn't have any situations where there was a staunch uprising for not hiring an academic. So I was lucky there. And then the other thing that I learned that was my biggest challenge was, as coaching, I called the plays a lot of times. So I was making a decision every 25 seconds. Higher ed doesn't move quite that fast. And so a lot of times that leadership team, I grew up, near a ranch and worked on a ranch a lot. And so if you take the horse analogy, the leadership team always has to have a bridle on me and make sure they're pulling back on the reins because I'm going as a former coach. And so, but it's been a great experience. It's been a great ride. I've learned a ton. And I think frankly, it was interesting because a lot of coaches actually called me after I got the job and said, hey, thank goodness you've broken this glass ceiling for us. Maybe others will look at us for our leadership skills, not just because we're affiliated with a sport. And the other part that's been interesting is, people kind of remember me because I have such a unique background, if that makes sense. So I was up in their state legislature doing some lobbying and stuff. And of course, everybody associated with Nebraska loves Nebraska football. And so the fact that I had an affiliation has really helps me break the ice sometimes with people I don't know because my background is so unique and they kind of want to know what the transition's been like. So it's been a great springboard into hopefully developing a lot of relationships that can help Doane and Doane students. That's a long version. I apologize, but that's the version.
No, I love it because to your point, it's such a unique path.
Mm-hmm.
And to that end, when you're talking to prospective students and families, how do you make sure that they understand the value of a degree or value of education, especially for first generation students that may just not understand the path at all?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a first generation myself, and so it's easy to relate there. And I think the fact that I've recruited, for 40 years kind of helps me relate to both they and their parents. And so at the end of the day, I talk to the students about, okay, first of all, take money out of it. That's not your decision right now. The money's going to work out depending on where you go. It's going to be fine. You need to figure out what you're looking for. What are the really most important things? And I say, figure out the 5 things that you are really wanting in a school. And then figure out the 5 schools that give you what you want. And then you start talking about money. And I talk about the parents as well. There's going to be a time when your son or daughter is going to come to you and say, Mom and Dad, what do you think? And that's when you should be taking your notes on the 5 most important things of how your son or daughter is going to adjust to college. But the things that I talk about, one of the things that we've allowed in higher education is we've allowed the media and the politicians to redefine who we are. And we've got to take the narrative back. It's absolutely, research shows that those who go to college versus those who don't will make $2.4 million more on average than those who don't go to college. So the conversation should be over right there, but it's not. And so, they talk about undergraduate education not penciling out now. And I said, it's never penciled out. I mean, in the public education, if you went to public school, the state always supplemented undergraduate education, didn't ever pay for itself there. And in the private sector, we always have an annual fund that makes up the difference as well. So undergraduate has never penciled out as far as dollars for the university, but it absolutely pencils out when you talk about the opportunities that students have. For example, there are certain professions, there is no argument that undergraduate education is important. A doctor, lawyer, dentist, physical therapy, there's no question you should go to a 4-year degree. So really, we're really only working on about 1/3 of the other students that come to college to try to figure out kind of what they want to do and kind of figure out what they're good at. And I think that's one of the things. You need to find a place that's going to challenge you. You need to find a place that's going to demand you increase your accountability. But more importantly, you need to go to a place that's going to bring out the best in you and help you find out what you're really good at. And therefore, you need to make sure you're going to come to a university that's going to look out for you. And frankly, at Doane, we're very, very personal. We're very small, 850 students face to face. And so we know our students by name. And when they make mistakes, we're right there to help them up. And if they need encouragement, we're right there to put our arms around them to get them going, if that makes sense. So I try to talk about here's the unique thing. Our economy is changing so quickly that what you train for right now may be obsolete in 5 years. And the workforce is seeing that as well. With the advent of certificates and other things that are going on, you need to continually renew your skills. And so my question to parents and students is, what university is going to take care of you after your first job? In other words, I feel at Doane here, we do a good job of instilling habits and values that are going to last the rest of your life. And instill, and it goes back to working in teams. We're made to work in teams. So if we can teach students to build teams, work within teams, how can you handle the bad teammate and keep the organization going and then eventually lead teams? I think the gift of leadership is the greatest gift we can give young people. And that's what Doane's been doing for 150 years. Now that I'm on my soapbox, thank you very much. But that's it. And so research shows by the time these students graduate, by the time they're 32 years old, they will have had 6 different jobs. But what's the skill set that's going to allow you to jump job to job and career to career? And that's, in my opinion, the liberal arts, the ones that creative thinking, leadership, being able to form teams, all those types of things are going to be so much more important as you go forward in your career, because you don't know what's going to be the next job. In fact, we're trying to train students for jobs that haven't been even thought of yet. So I believe you got to teach kids to do the skill sets that I talked about previously. And if you do that, then in my mind, I'm taking care of our students even after they graduate for the next 30 years of their life.
Well, absolutely. And you had talked about, preparing students and making sure that they are ready once they graduate. How are you making sure that Doane stays connected to alums?
Well, it's a constant, I don't want to say struggle, but it's a constant effort because, again, as people change jobs, their contact information changes all the time. And the other part is it's still got to be personal. Emails and text messages are great, but at the end of the day, keeping your alums informed and keeping them engaged is a contact sport, if that makes sense. So we try to do a number of things to engage them. And we also try to, frankly, weaponize our alumni, because the research shows at smaller institutions, most alumni have a positive experience at your school and will be willing to talk to prospective students in a very positive way and tell them exactly what it's like. We're also finding out that prospective students, are not reading the marketing materials we're sending out. They're more inclined to talk to an alum or talk to someone who's been there, talk to someone who's had an experience that they're looking for to find out what it's like. And so by keeping our alumni engaged and keeping them informed of all the changes that are happening in higher ed and how Doane's adjusting to them is crucial down the road. So we're trying to make our alumni not only mentors, internship providers, job providers, and donors. We're also trying to make them weaponize them to become great recruiters as well.
So you had mentioned that you do fundraising, right? In your role, what makes a successful fundraiser?
Wow, if I figure that out, I'll let you know. I think. Well, first of all, it's still people. Giving is an emotional response. And so what I think about, Brad, is how do we create the appropriate experience, because people always remember how you make them feel. I know it's really cliche, but that's how I really feel it.
Yeah.
I want our trustees running to the airport to get out here for the trustee meeting. So I'm always looking for ways to what's the trustee experience like? What's the student experience like? What's the alumni experience like? And I've also found that, instead of always asking what's cheapest, we ask what's best and work back from there. Because if you start with what's cheapest and start with what's best and start working to where you can afford it, you never intersect. So we're going to start at being the best we can. And if we can't afford the Taj Mahal, we can go maybe back to a 5-star Marriott, if that makes sense. Yeah. But again, it's all about the experience we're trying to create for people when we interact with them. The second thing is our students are great salespeople from the standpoint, you've got to make the connection to their gift. You got to connect that to the people that it helps and how it's helping those young students. So anytime we have a donor on campus, anytime I have the trustees on campus, I try to make sure they get to see what I see every day. Interaction between our faculty, our coaches, our staff with our students, and how our students are taking that to the next level with that type of mentorship. So it's all about creating an emotional connection and frankly, creating a need that people can get behind. And then when they see the result, which our product is our students, obviously, we want to make them feel really good about their investment.
And now you had mentioned that you have roughly 855 students in person on campus. Right. Overall, you have roughly 2,000. Is that fair to say?
About 2,700. Yeah, we were in the online space at Doane a lot earlier than a lot of people. Back in the 80s, we started an adult learning. We were kind of let us help you finish your degree. Maybe you got started and life got in the way. Let us help you. And then we've started graduate programs and doctoral programs actually as well have built on that. So all in, if you count all of our head count of all the people who take courses online and at our other campuses in Lincoln and Omaha, our head count's about 2,700.
Okay. So how big do you want to get, and how big can you get, I guess, and then how big do you want to get?
Great question. So that's really two questions. Number one, in the online space, virtually it's unlimited because the amount of resources you have to dedicate isn't quite as great as having to build buildings and buildings to house kids as well as classrooms. So that's really unlimited going forward. I would like to see our graduate program grow and improve. I think our business school is going to be our business school and engineering school are going to be two areas of, I think, great growth, and we're going to try to combine those. So let's say you get an engineering degree, and oh, by the way, in a plus 1 year, you can get your MBA as well. And now you have engineers who can take the data and apply it to the real world and really turn it into a monetary windfall. If you're talking about the residential campus, research tends to show that campuses with 1,000 students or more tend to have a better chance to survive. We were at that 1,100 point back in 2011 to 2013. And so my goal is to get to the point where we get to 1,100. And then we have to make a decision, Brad. We got to decide, we just opened a brand new residence hall here, which is state of the art and really cool. But if we get to 1,100 students, we're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to grow to about 1,200, which I think 12 to 1,250 is the sweet spot, because right now our student to professor ratio is such that we wouldn't have to add a lot of faculty. So that could be all margin from the business side of stuff. So I think, my goal is to get us to 1,100 and force our trustees to have to make that decision. Do we build another residence hall or do we not? And so we're in the process of getting there, and it's not happening as fast as I want, but we are getting there.
And so the competition is fierce. I mean, I think a lot of folks would say that the market is saturated with colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. So, how do you make sure you've expressed a number of ways that Doane differentiates? How do you make sure that you're able to compete and win against the college down the street?
Well, Brad, I think the first thing is your attitude. We are not tucking our wings here. We are investing and we are thriving. And when I first got the job, there were a bunch of executive coaches that wanted to help me. And so I did a kind of a test run. And one of the questions I was asked was, what are the 5 characteristics you would like to be known for? And one of the 5 was fearless. I want to be fearless. I want our faculty to be fearless. I want to try new things. I want a venture capital type attitude here. Now we can't go to the only 2 out of 10 of our ideas work. We can't have that kind of ratio, but I want to be cutting edge. I want to try new things. I want to make sure that we can be nimble enough that we can go with the ebbs and flows of the economy as it changes. I think one's your attitude, number one. Number two is we can't be afraid to pivot if it's not working. We can't ride her till she burns, but the same standpoint, we can't be afraid of taking a chance just because we're afraid of what might happen. You never know, something good might happen too. And so I think it has to start with attitude first. The second thing is, people talk about differentiating yourself. How do you quantify that? For us, it's the personal touch, but that's really hard to put on paper. So you've got to try to find examples of what people who've gone through what we're asking you to purchase from us, what kind of experiences have they had? And luckily here at Doane, we have numerous CEOs, business owners, professional people we can point to and say, hey, give this you want to be a surgeon? My brother's a surgeon, went to Doane. Give my brother a call and find out exactly what it's like to give them that mentor type experience. But the other part is, I think this cross fertilization, what I call it, of different disciplines. I mentioned one earlier, engineering and MBA. We've got to embrace artificial intelligence, and I think we've got to help show kids how they can utilize that for other opportunities. Cybersecurity is another area that's going to have about, I think, 770 occupations that's going to come out of that. Well, almost all of those are going to require a 4-year degree. So we've got to make sure that we stay in those areas that we see opportunities for our students. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we've done a pretty good job in higher ed for access to things. What we're doing at Doane is we're focused on outcomes. We got to make sure that all those who have access to Doane and get the degree now can have a great outcome and get placed in jobs or professional schools before they want to go.
So talk about that experience of being able to walk on campus, talk to prospective students, families, current students, alums, et cetera, and to be able to have new buildings. You had mentioned the residence hall. I mean, the impact that must have of seeing cranes, of seeing areas of development. I mean, what type of impact does that have when you're walking around and showing that things are in action? It's, to your point, it's not words.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of our goals is to make that crane you talked about the city bird, so to speak, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that that's going on. So I think anytime there's type of construction on campus, there's an energy. There's a expectation that you're getting better and that you're providing. You're concerned about the experience you're providing for students and their families as they come to Doane. We want to make sure that we're providing the most up-to-date experience that we can with the skill set with that. I think the other part is being able to. The other part, I guess, part of it is you've got to demonstrate where your value is. For example, people will pay more to come to Doane if they come to Doane than maybe some of our competitors. So we've got to justify why that difference is worth it. And I think the best way to do that is to, first of all, listen to what the client wants. I call students clients because those clients, we don't think about them for 4 years. We do really think about them for 40. And I know it's cliche, but it's really how we think here. So we've got to find out, how can we connect what you want with what you need. For example, a lot of students right now are coming in and saying, hey, how do I get my first job? And while that's important, as I said earlier, by the time you're 32, you'll have had 6 different ones. So I know this is what you want, but I sometimes need to give you what you need going forward. And that's where our Doane core comes in with the liberal arts. I'm a big liberal arts believer. And I go back to the leadership thing that I talked about and being able to create teams. I think those types of skill sets and being able to communicate those skill sets is crucial. People talk to me, what's the liberal arts? And we had a panel here. We had 6 different people who all had a different version of what the liberal arts. For me, what the liberal arts is, it makes the data come to life. You can be an engineering student and create all this data, but if you can't interpret it, tell the story about it, and then use it to better the world or better your career, then what good is it? And so you want to not only create really smart people, but you want to also create great communicators who can use the brilliance that they have to make the world better. And I will.
So now, where do you see?
That's the corniest answer in America. I am the corniest president in America. I'll tell you that right now.
Hey, you know what though? It makes a lot of sense though. It
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. Where do you see the institution in 10 years?
Wow, great question. So, well, we're just started we're in the silent phase of a campaign. We haven't had a campaign here at Doane for 25 years. And so I mentioned the residence hall that we've just built a new president's residence and event center, which will help us create, again, the experience that we want for our donors, our alumni, and our students while they're on campus. We just got approval to proceed with a fine arts building. So we'll be adding additions both to our theater and to our music area. And then we're in the process of developing a new business building as well. And we're hoping to include some of that cross pollination that I talked about earlier with engineering, mathematics, computer science, and AI all in one area. And so essentially what you want to think about is a mini tech park right there, where all those collisions can occur between disciplines, which is really the collaboration between the disciplines is really where I think things are going to go. And then eventually, Brad, we're looking at funding for actually starting a tech center where we can invite businesses to partner with us. And I think, for a long time, businesses have looked at higher education. You're my source for a workforce. We've got to stop that. I want Doane to be the solution center for any business. You come in, you bring a problem to us, we will help you solve it. We will help you integrate it. We'll help you execute it as you go forward. And I think that type of partnership with the business schools, and I'm sorry, with the businesses in what I call the real world. In other words, you're connecting the Ivy Tower to the street, so to speak. I think that's going to be crucial going forward, and we're pursuing those relationships now. So I'm always talking to futuristic people where things going. I want our board thinking 5 to 7 years down the road. And sometimes it's hard, given some of the financial concerns we have now, to have that vision. And I keep telling the trustees, let me worry about what's here. You guys be thinking about where we need to be 5 to 10 years down the road. So I see Doane, and so I've only talked about the Creek campus. Then when you talk about, I tell our professors we've got to get more of our materials and online. We got to be able to teach in multiple modalities.
Yeah.
And I've told hey, I'll be right here holding your hand as you convert from face to face to that. We've done it before in COVID. Don't tell me you can't. We can get it done, and we get it done pretty early. Because I tell our faculty all the time, what we do here at Doane is pretty good. And the more Doane we can get into the world makes a better world.
Well, absolutely. And what an advantage it is, not just your extensive experience, in sports and on the academic side, but that ability to talk about the fact that you're an alum, you were first generation. So that's got to be so powerful to be able to talk to families, especially those families that are first generation, and say, hey, I'm not just talking the talk. I was in your shoes.
Yeah. Well, it is, Brad. And the other part is during the recruiting process, I've recruited student athletes for 40 years, as I said. And so talking to parents about, okay, you're doing the right thing by coming to see our campus. Now, let me help you through this process. There's going to come a time when you're going to go, what do we do? And we've made the process of selecting a school too stressful. It should be the most fun time of the student's life. But as it starts out really fun, and then all of a sudden it gets not so fun when people tell you they said they loved you, but now they don't, or the money's not looking like it's going to work. And it really puts a lot of pressure on parents too. I mean, I've seen instances where the student finally makes a decision, and you look at the parents going, finally we can move on with things like that because it is stressful. And so just trying to make them understand that everybody goes through this. It's okay to feel stressful. We're here to help you make the best decision. And the other thing I tell them all the time is you need to find your place. And if that place is a little more expensive, pay the extra money, because you're going to get better grades. You're going to have a better experience. You're going to be able to tell your grandkids a lot better stories, because you're going to have a lot more fun at college if you're at a place where you love it. But figure out what that is. And then ultimately the recruiting process should help you find where your place is. I hope it's wearing orange and black here at Doane as a Tiger. But if we help you find your place other places, then we've kind of done our job as well. But obviously I'm the president, so I have to be the cheerleader as well. But what we do here is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's that split between student athlete and student? And I would imagine you're able to get out to as many sporting events as you can.
Yeah, and I'm blessed with an unbelievable wife who when I can't be there, she is. And It's interesting. We were undergoing some HLC. We had some shared governance issues when my very first semester here. We had an HLC visit, which is exactly what every new president needs to have. And so they found some concerns, and they came back a year later. And as they were going through the process with me of what they found, they put their pens down. They said, "Roger, we got to tell you something." And I'm thinking, "Oh my goodness, here it comes." They said, "We can't believe the change in this place since you've gotten here." And I said, "That's not me. I've got a great team." They said, "No." They said, "The students see you at all these events. The students see you at everything that they're doing." I get emotional about it. I apologize, but that's important. You're showing up, or your wife is showing up, and they really feel like it's important that they do well because you're there. And it gives them a sense of importance of that combination between all the extracurricular, we call them co-curricular here. We've got an unbelievable music band. We've got unbelievable choir. Our theater departments has won 10 different Kennedy Awards in the last year. And we're just a smaller school that thinks big, so to speak, if that makes sense. And so, yes, you're right. The president showing up and being part of that is crucial. In fact, I'll probably head out to football practice today. And if those linemen aren't taking the right drop step as their pass pro, and I may rip my pants out showing them how to do it. But the kids are kind of cool because they'll stop by the office and say, "When are you coming back out to practice?" And so yeah, I was doing what they did a long time ago, and that hasn't changed. And it's fun to kind of have that relationship with them.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Dr. Roger Hughes, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Brad, thanks so much for having us on. I hope what I've said can help students, prospective students, parents, and obviously others in the higher ed field. And we have some work to do, but like other institutions and other businesses like the news media, the music and the film industry, they've had to adapt. We'll be able to adapt too.
Well, I love it. Well, thanks again. Very inspiring.
Thanks, Brad.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of College Admission TV Presidential Podcast with Roger Hughes, president of Doane University. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where we will sit down with Jose Marie Griffiths, president of Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota.